Hello everyone, and welcome back to Reverse Engineering Linux 32-bit Applications. In this video, I want to continue our discussion of reversing malware, and in particular, I want to talk about symbols and libraries. So far we've done some pretty simple things. We used the file command, and we also did some hashing, checked our known databases for files, and we also used strings. So let's go to the next level of complexity without actually delving into assembly and all those other things just yet. So I have my suspect executables here, and I can look at the symbols defined in each of them. So how do I do that? The command I want to use is called nm. And nm will allow me to see the symbols that are defined in something. Now, of course, if I don't know how to use this command, I could try my standard Linux thing of doing nm-help. And it says list a symbol in file or files. And if I don't tell it what file, it's going to say a.out. That's the default output when I compile something and I don't tell it what my output file should be. And it will list all kinds of information for me when I use this. And it tells me here at the bottom what are the supported formats and all of that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the nm command. So I'll say nm against Xing Yi bind shell. I'm going to pipe that to less. So here I see a bunch of symbols that have been defined. Now, you might say, well, what do these symbols mean? A U actually means this is an undefined symbol. So an undefined symbol means that this is defined somewhere else. So this is probably a library function of some sort. R, what does R stand for? R is a symbol in a read-only data section. I have D. D is a symbol for an initialized data section. And what are some other symbol types? T is a symbol in the text section. So daemonize could be a function name. B is in our uninitialized data section known as BSS. Notice here I have a capital B, and that means BSS start. W is used for a weak symbol. That's something that you can override. And let's see if there's anything else that we should talk about here. U is a undefined symbol. That means it's external. And again, here we have htons, which is defined in libc. So I can see all of the symbols that have been defined. Now you might say, how is this different from using strings? This is a great question. This is slightly different. The strings will take anything that looks like it could be a string and it will output it. And that will include things such as symbols that have been defined. However, this is a little bit narrower of a focus. So this is only going to output symbols. So that means only things like functions that were defined or functions that were imported. So all of the U's, these are imported functions. So that will give you a slightly different picture. You know, in a sense, the strings command can give you a lot of noise. So you might say, all right, I don't know, is this really even a string at all? Because it'll find things that could be strings. You're going to get a lot of false positives with strings. If you look at the different flags that you can use with it, you can say, please search in more areas than what it does by default, and then you'll really get a lot of false positives. So that is NM. It will list your various symbols in your file. Notice that I don't have things like Swordman. That was my password, I think, for something that I found when I used strings. So I don't see that kind of information, but I do see information on functions and such. If I do the same thing on my other file, it says, hey, there's no symbols here. And why is that? Probably because it's going to use the other executable. Okay, what if I do this on this guy? Same story. I have a bunch of functions that are being defined. And I see things like bind port, cleanup module, etc., etc. And that can be somewhat insightful. Now, if we go back to our second executable, it said, I have no symbols. And I might have implied that, well, that's because the other guy's using it. Well, is that really the case? Let me do something real quick. And when I run this command now on my reverse shell, I suddenly get all these symbols back. And you might say, why is that? Well, here's why. Remember how we stripped this executable a video or so back? We stripped that executable and that removed all of these symbols. So we don't have necessarily full-on debugging information in here, but we do have the symbols that were defined, the symbol table, if you will. And if I strip it, then I'm going to lose all this information. And what does that do to me? As a reverse engineer, it makes my life a lot harder because it's very clear here. I have things like bind port, bind shell password, demonize, reverse shell port, root shell password, etc., etc. So these give me a little bit of insight into this program. I also see things like what's it going to import. And that's pretty useful as well. So that's the nm command. Well, what about libraries? We can look at libraries that are used, in particular shared libraries that are used using LDD. So if I run LDD on my bind shell, again, I'm going to pipe this to less. It tells me what libraries are being used. Now, in this case, the list isn't very long. I'm using libc and a couple of other libraries as well. Just some basic stuff here is being used. What about this guy? Same story. Okay. And if I try to look at my KO file, it says, hey, this is not a dynamic executable. This is not an executable that loads DLLs. So that is symbols and libraries. Again, very simple stuff you can do. We still have not gotten down into the deep, bowels, if you will, of this executable. We haven't had to look inside and start looking at assembly code or anything like that just yet. So we're still kind of at a little bit higher of a level in our analysis. And you'll notice that you can find out quite a bit without even having to know assembly, just using these simple tools like this. Okay, so we're getting ready to get a little deeper now. So pretty soon we will be going down into the depths of assembly and all of that in our executables that we're suspecting as malware. So just a reminder again, this is a video in a whole series of videos that we have here at Pentester Academy on reverse engineering, forensics, all kinds of pen testing topics. Basically everything you ever wanted to know about InfoSec. We probably have a class on it here at Pentester Academy, which is your number one source for all things InfoSec. And I look forward to seeing you in this course or another course soon. See you then.